There we go. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where we talk about horror movies and streaming shows. I am here with my very good friend over there, Danny Kotok. And if anything happens to him,
is that a whalebone behind you or a pink bed?
yeah, it's my daughter's pink bed. I was so worried about doing that and like knocking myself off the stream again, so I had to be careful.
Yeah, you have very infamously like jolted yourself off the screen one time.
So Danny, it's Danny Torkel, Dr. Zayas God, and we are here to talk about True Detective Night Country episode 4, which if you looked at my little clickers I've put on the screen, Danny, this is a pretty damn depressing episode, don't you think?
Yeah, this was super depressing. I mean, it basically felt like dominoes just like falling of like, all right, here's a character, let's break him down. Here's a character, let's break him down physically, emotionally, spiritually. They're gonna have nothing left.
Right.
This guy can't even get a Russian mail order bride.
Right.
Yeah, this was not a fun episode of television in the sense that, like, you people watch TV and even like weirdly true crime stories and like shows about like, murders and awful things. And we watch those things to like escape and like, get deep into like a mystery that we can like think about. And this did not do that. This was a very much a depressing, like, man, it took me like I don't want to say 2 tries to get through the episode, but like I put it on Sunday night, like late around like 11 o'clock.
Sure.
And I made it about 15 minutes and I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to watch this tomorrow. Yeah. And then last night even I put it on and I was like, all right, I got about 15 minutes left. Let me pause it. Let me come back to it when I'm like, it was a lot.
Yeah. Like, let me go step outside for a minute, take a couple of deep breaths, maybe get myself a drink or smoke a cigarette, just deal with this sort of depressing episode. I shared an article with you a couple of days ago, or maybe it was even just yesterday. It was by Forbes, right? It was a writer for Forbes, Eric Kane. And I think it was funny because we keep talking about when we review this show, how there seems to be 2 different audiences, right? There's the audience that I think we kind of fit into the camp of where we really like Isa Lopez. We just reviewed Tigers Are Not Afraid. Guys, go check that video out because on this channel, we're getting a lot of views for these, but that one needs a little help. So go check out our Tigers Are Not Afraid review.
Watch the movie. It's great.
Yeah, that too. Go on Shudder and check out the movie. But we like Isa Lopez a lot, and we like this show. Then the other camp seems to be these sort of men that are kind of upset with the show, and they kind of keep pointing out all these like kind of inconsistencies or things that don't make sense. Now, did you have a chance to look at that article, Danny? I know you've been real busy.
I read the article on the way home, and it's one of those things that, and I've given Chris credit for this to his face the last time I saw him, which was a couple Saturdays ago.
Okay.
Chris said, has always said that that you're not fully into something when you start logic nitpicking it.
Yes.
And that is, that line kept repeating in my head when I read this guy from Forbes review. It's a fairly scathing review.
Yeah.
Where he just, I'm sure he would not consider these nitpicks. I'm sure he considers these to be like gaping logic flaws in the show. But like, I consider myself somebody who gets annoyed by logic flaws in shows. And I never, it never occurred to me as I was watching it.
Yeah.
So I can't retroactively be like, oh yeah, that didn't make sense. Oh, I don't like this now. I don't know if it's I don't want to accuse him of this writer of like being chauvinistic. But he's obviously not into this season.
Yes.
I do kind of feel that if you wanted to, you could do this back for season 1, though. Nitpick little things. Like one of his things is making a point that like there's really nobody likable on the show. And while I love Matthew McConaughey and while I like Woody Harrelson as actors, I didn't really think there was anybody likable in season 1 either. Like, I think like that's kind of the conceit of True Detective. Now, granted, I've only watched seasons 1 and 4.
Yes.
But likable characters is not something you come to True Detective for. Like, Rust and Marty are not likable. They're like, Marty is a bad husband, a bad father, and he's a serial cheater, a drunk, and Rust is like, I mean, he's more just freaking out there and weird. He almost feels like Matthew McConaughey when he's putting on a persona to sell like a car. Like, I'm in my Buick, and I don't know if there's life after death, but we got to find these killers because I need my Buick. And like it felt like I loved the show, but like not likable. Like you're rooting for them because the other like the killer on the show murdered children, but you're not rooting for them as humans. And I feel that it's very similar this season. I look at this season so far and I'm able to move past the logic holes as they are because of a couple of things. First of all, I think it's very obvious compared to season 1 that there is, I mean, they're almost overtly going into some level of supernatural stuff now. I mean, there were like actual ghosts in this episode, and you have this weird guy screaming about the night country at the end.
Right.
And then so going into the supernatural and going into the like embracing the horror aspect of it, I think allows me to move past some of the logic gaffes that I would have. And also I think that the setting of this show is a character in and of itself. And I think that it speaks to what it must be like living in friggin' rural Alaska. In the like the darkest period where there's like 30 days of night. Like one of the criticisms that he brings up in the article was about like, how come there's no stars in the sky? Like, I'm sorry. If you're watching True Detective and you're worried about how come I didn't see a computer digitized version of the Northern Lights, maybe you should watch something else. Maybe Eric Kane or whatever his name is. Like, again, he's more than entitled to his opinion. And he's certainly not the only one who's not into this series. But if you're concerned about why are there no stars in the sky, dude, like, go watch Monarch. Okay, there's some monsters in it. Kurt Russell's fun. Go watch something else. Because, like, what are you doing? Like, I will forever come back to Lost is one of the most successful and most beloved shows in the history of television.
Right.
And it's a 7-season logic flaw. And nothing on the show made sense. And whenever and that's how I knew Lost was not for me. Because every moment of Lost I spent going, but what about these 12 other plot threads that they didn't answer. Like,
Right.
what is this? You know, oh, it's not Penny's boat. Who the fuck cares? Like, what do the numbers mean? And why was there black smoke monster? Why was there a polar bear on a tropical island?
Right.
Things that were never answered. And I nitpicked the show to hell because I was not into it enough to move past those logic gaps. Athena
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit.
Right. Right.
It's one of her favorite shows in the history of television. And if I ask her a question about the logic gaps, she goes, I don't care. I love it.
Right.
And that's a lot of people. And I know I'm in the minority there.
Right.
So,
yeah.
like, at the end of the day, this is an 8-episode season of a show. It's not like you have to make this huge commitment to it. So if you're watching this show and it's becoming a hate watch for you and you're nitpicking the shit out of it, like, save yourself the time, save yourself the trouble. There's so much to watch that we are in content like heaven now for those that, like, I hear Secret Invasion is great and has great special effects.
Oof.
Oh wait, no, I didn't hear that at all.
I was gonna say, I don't know who's telling you that. It wasn't this guy.
No.
Yeah.
But like you get, like, I don't know. Like I read, like, he just seemed like, instead of actually reviewing the episode, he just wanted to list off all the things he hated about it. And if you're at that point, stop watching the show.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to say things are not for you. There are things that are beloved in this world in entertainment that are not for me. Okay.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's the whole thing, right? I do think that the guy kind of had an agenda when he wrote this article. I think that if you look at the fucking title of the article, the title is True Detective Night Country, Episode 4 Review. The Crushing Disappointment Continues. It's quite a title. And so, you know, you brought up the fact that he was criticizing there not being stars in the sky in this forever night in Alaska. And it's kind of funny because one of the cliches that you hear about men complaining about female directors is that a lot of their shots, the men say that their shots are dark or they're not lit well. And here's a guy complaining about the lights in the sky. You know, it's so funny. But
he also complained. I don't want to spend the entire time complaining about this one review on Forbes.
Right.
But he also said that he hates the one, like, the fact that Pryor is
yeah, they're both called Pryor, but the son, she calls him Pryor, right? Yeah.
Peter, right? That
Peter.
He keeps complaining that his wife keeps complaining about him working this case, and how he hates that trope of, like, the wife always complaining about, why would you be on this big murder case? That's not why she's complaining. She's not complaining, oh my God, you're still out hunting for these murderers. She's complaining that he's being, and he knows he's being, everybody tells him that Danvers is taking advantage of you and overworking you. And, like, on Christmas, he gets a call as he's leaving to go do something because she's drunk. And, you know, he was sitting there watching frozen bodies thaw out instead of being at home with his wife and his young child, very young child. So it's not like his wife is at home going, like, oh my God, I can't believe you're putting the search for this deadly murderer above me. No, she's upset that he's allowing himself to be, like, overworked by his boss, who also has a reputation of sleeping with married men.
Yeah.
And so if I was married to, you know, somebody, and if Athena's boss had a history of sleeping with all the married women, I'd be like, I don't want you to work late with that guy anymore. And so like, his complaint there, that was the one part of the review that really kind of irked me. Like, I get it. You're nitpicking the hell out of this show. I get it. Like, the scene, I will admit, the scene in the two things he said actually made sense to me. Like, first of all, I was actually surprised that a place as small as Ennis had a mental health clinic. And
Yes.
second, it made no sense to me that she was allowed to walk out. I
Yes.
took it as that maybe it was like a super. I was hoping it was kind of like like she saw that like ghost under the bed, that it was like something where she had just like escaped from it. That I could at least understand a little. Didn't bother me, but I can understand like the focusing on that.
Yeah.
But the complaining about like other things, it just felt like dude, you don't like the show. Like there's only 4 episodes left. Instead of like wasting an hour of your life watching it and then probably hours of your life writing these scathing reviews, maybe tell Forbes you want to cover something else. Like
Yeah.
it's not like Forbes is like, you must cover True Detective season 4
Yeah.
or you're out of here.
Right. Right. But I mean, that's the problem with media in general, like media coverage, like our show itself and like articles and things like that, is that you really only get viewers or readers when you have a polarized view, right? This is the most amazing thing. This is why it's so amazing, or this is awful, and this is why it's awful. And
That's the
I
whole
have,
controversy with like best of and worst of, like worst of lists. Like a lot
yeah,
of people who I respect in the film community on and in the horror community on social media are like, how about we don't do worst of lists?
yeah,
My only response to that was, and I said this, and I just tweeted this like very diplomatically, is
yeah,
there are some movies that I'm pretty sure would like go off into the ether of streaming and never be heard from again. But because they make a worst of list, people might actually go to watch them. Because
yeah.
there are people that like want to see how bad Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey. Like that
Okay.
was everyone's worst horror movie of 2023.
Right.
I haven't watched it yet, but maybe I'm somebody who was like, what? How bad can this be? Oh my God. And
Yeah.
then like get together with some buddies and throw on, and then like every view of it on every rental on VOD is helping filmmakers out. And like, yeah, sure. It's, but yeah,
Yeah.
we also, to your point, we also live in a world where it's all about the clicks, it's all about the views, and the uh what's the word? It's the the algorithm
Yeah.
suggests that, hate watching and hate reviewing draws big numbers. I mean, the fact that we pretty much have been very positive towards this show so far, maybe that's why we've gotten some decent, for us, we've gotten some decent views because, maybe we are the rare, other side of that coin. And maybe people, it's weird. Like I said last time, this series has gotten universal praise from critics on like Rotten Tomatoes, but most of the things you read about it in like magazines or online is negative.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a disconnect between, I don't know, like this show had me hooked when 6 guys were frozen together in a corpsicle in at the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
And so I just on the strength of that, I'm willing to go with it for another 4 episodes to see where we end up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really good points. I was going to say that you brought up the thing in the article where they're talking about Pryor and his wife and how she is complaining about him having to work so much. You made a really great point addressing the article. I think there's one thing I would say about that, because I actually did have 2 problems with this episode. One of the problems I had was that it's kind of like too much. Like it's kind of too much of Jodie Foster asking him to do stuff and him not putting his foot down. Like it's Christmas Eve, right? Now, the reason why it feels like it's too much, and this isn't a nitpicky thing, is because it seems like the mystery and the tension and the suspense is based upon the character's own obsessions versus the idea of like, oh, there's someone that's out there killing people and it's going to come kill everybody. Like the main horror, the main murder happened initially, but when you're 4 episodes in of an 8 episode series, you usually have like another murder or someone that's like kind of on the radar to be killed. So it feels like, oh, this is going to happen again. So let's get this sense of urgency. Now, the show has a very strong drive, but it's basically based on the drive of, Jodie Foster and Navarro basically wanting to save solve Annie Kotok's murder. And the murder of the men at Salal even kind of takes a backstage to that. It's kind of like they're using the Salal thing to reopen that murder, and that's the main focus is that. And
but
so there, go ahead.
My only counter to that is Annie Kotok's tongue was on the floor in the Salal station. So like I feel like, again, I don't want to spend, we're already 20 minutes in, I don't want to spend every waking moment, going over this article. Because now we're hate reviewing a guy's opinion about the show. And again, he's entitled to hate the show. He's entitled to hate the show. And I'm not pushing an agenda that he's like a chauvinist for not liking it. My whole argument with him is, if you don't like it this much, you should probably stop watching it.
Right.
But my to that point is like, her disappearance and murder it's not a separate thing to the Salal station guys. It's inextricably married to it. Her tongue was found there. The guy who's missing was her ex-boyfriend who got the same tattoo as her. So it's not like this is like oh man, these 6 guys died, but I really want to find out what happened to this girl I once knew. It's, oh, these 2 cases are connected. And by looking at one, we're going to find clues to the other. Again, I'm reading Stephen King's The Outsider, and I'm up to the point in the book where people from Flint City, where the violent, gross, disgusting murder that is the subject of the whole book has taken place, but now they're meeting up with other characters from Dayton, Ohio, where there was another case and there's links between them. So it's not like, it's like, oh, now we're worried about this case in Dayton. No, it's like they're connected and they're now trying to solve it as like a group case. And I feel like the focus on Annie Kotok is relevant because it has been since the first episode. Like Clark is wearing her pink jacket when he's having that seizure fit, and and then he looks at the camera and goes, she's awake. So like, we don't know now. It's been 4 episodes. I'd like to get to that of like, who is it? Annie? Is it some prehistoric whale monster demon? Is it like these bits of like, now this episode went back to that murder from last week where Danvers mentions that Navarro was starting to see things. And is this a part of like the indigenous culture in Alaska where, like her sister obviously dealt with mental health issues. And Annie obviously, from going into that cabin, that trailer that she had, like there's all sorts of like weird stuff going on. So like, I want to get to that weird stuff, and I don't want like to run out of time. Like I'm confident they will, because season 1, again, didn't watch 2 or 3, but season 1 wrapped up with like the main story. So I'm sure there's not going to be like a cliffhanger here. So I'd like there to just, 4 episodes to go. I'm a lot more confident with this than say I was with Yellow Jackets, where it's like, oh, I know there's going to be another season. So they're in no rush to solve any of these things. And it kind of started to feel like it was dragging by the end of season 2.
That's for damn sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the tickers that's on the bottom right now is the different layers of the show. And I basically broke down the show into a few different layers. And you've kind of already referenced the supernatural stuff a few times today. When I think about the true supernatural element of the show, it does seem like the dead come to give like warnings to certain people. We see of Navarro start to see dead people. She sees her own sister in this episode, right? And then we have oh God damn, Fiona Shaw. I can't remember her character's name, but Navarro goes to visit her. Fiona Shaw saw Russ Cole's father, and had a vision with him in like this first episode, and she kind of talks about the difference between visions and the spirit world, and then also mental illness. Now, I think that the sister, Navarro's sister, had mental illness, but she also could have visions as well. And basically, the ghosts are like warnings for the living. Now, the question is, I was asking this to Sherry as we were watching the show. Is this show going to have like a truly supernatural ending, and that it won't be this kind of thing where it could go either way? Like kind of like Tigers Are Not Afraid, where it could go either way, where it's like, oh, this was just like Navarro just had these visions, but this is what happened in reality. When Annie Kotok died, it was this very real thing. She was murdered by a man versus she was murdered by a supernatural force. You know, like I'm wondering, is it going to have a truly supernatural ending? Is it going to be something like The Outsider as the ending? What do you think?
Well, don't spoil the ending of The Outsider for me, but I already am kind of into that supernatural part of it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's going in the direction of some kind of like indigenous thing. I don't know. I thought this episode, like they bring up, so like they go to that teacher's house and he starts talking to them about like the cave system, and like there's mines, so it makes sense that there's like underground tunnels all throughout there. And it makes me feel like we're going to go into those tunnels. We're going to go into that cave system. We're going to go into those mines, and we're going to, is it something, under the ice? Is it some like indigenous spirit, or like, almost like a Wendigo type thing, force of nature? I don't know. They've done enough where it just doesn't feel like it can be a human killer, maybe a human killer of Annie Kotok, but did something like they brought up that the guys at Salal were frozen to death, they did not freeze to death. It's like they didn't like get cold, huddle up, and fall asleep and freeze. They died of like probably heart attacks from fear. And so something had to scare them. And I don't think that something is like a guy holding a gun at them,
Yes.
Is there some Lovecraft mythos monster in the ice kind of thing?
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know yet, but now there's hints to the night country and what that is about. And, all of these characters are seeing like glimpses of the dead. So I think it's moved beyond the point where it can be to quote The Outsider, it's like, they bring up the line from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, where it's like, when you've eliminated all of the impossible, whatever is left is probably it. But they've ruled out that it is like something normal so far.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I feel like you can't. I mean, you bring up a really good point that like, how could these guys have all died of fright if it was just a regular person? Really good point.
Yeah. I'm not going to freeze to death like this and have a heart attack if somebody pulled a gun on me.
I mean, even if it was a machine gun, yeah. But with this supernatural stuff, it's funny because I think about shows that this gets compared to. Think about True Detective season 1. I'd say True Detective season 1 is like a whole bunch of different things, but maybe it's about 30% supernatural. There's something more going on here. About 30%, maybe even less. Then you think of a show like Twin Peaks, and Twin Peaks The original series, at least, I'd say it was like 45% supernatural stuff, and then just like weird, quirky, like a whole bunch of other things for the rest, but like 45% supernatural weird stuff. Twin Peaks: The Return, it gets more supernatural and weird. But this show, though, I would say is really kind of leaning into that supernatural angle, and it's
You're
really
a
playing for
fan. I
visions.
know you're a fan of Fargo, right? How does this compare
That
with like? I know Fargo is probably quirkier because
yeah,
I'm thinking of the movie,
yeah,
and like obviously there's not a lot to laugh at in this show, especially this episode.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it
It's
just feels like there's like I know that there's some supernatural stuff that happens on Fargo too, right? Or
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could take, like, you know how Netflix has, supernatural thrillers or like superhero movies. Like, if there's a category, you could just scroll across and it would be like Fargo, True Detective season 4, True Detective season 1, Twin Peaks, Yellow Jackets. They'd all kind of be in that same kind of category. And I think that's why we love them so much. But one of the things that's so good about the first season, and I think that they try to capture it in this show, but maybe they don't do as good a job in this show, is they have this sort of cops driving around in cars having serious, like, existential conversations with each other. Like, I think that the first season really captures that very well. In this, it does try to do that, and I don't think it's bad, but I just don't think it's on the level of season 1, where you have scenes where it's like Danvers and Navarro driving throughout the town talking to each other about life. At one point, we've kind of already dropped a lot of spoilers, but after Navarro's sister dies, she goes to Danvers' house, and Danvers has this whole speech about death. There's nothing here. There's no God. There's nothing else. It's just us. The dead are dead, right? And then Navarro drops that kind of bomb of, they just found my dead sister. Like, there's that kind of stark reality that Jodie Foster is so bound into. And she's got that part of her personality that shows up in every episode where it's like, ask the right questions. There's this whole detective side to it, which the fucking title of the show comes from, right? But I feel like it's there's a lot less of that in this season than in the first season. And I like that stuff. I'm not just here for the supernatural stuff,
yeah, no, 100%. Like, and I do think that if there's a place where I'd like the show to be more, it would be to be more like, I like the Danvers, the Jodie Foster. You got to ask the right questions. You got to ask the right questions. And I like the like digging into the case and like researching and finding the stuff about Annie Kotok and Clark and the tattoo and like because that is you're watching this show called True Detective. You want there to be some type of mystery to it, some type of crime that needs to be solved. And I think that the show has, I don't want to say it's gotten away from that, but it felt like it was very into that in episodes 1, 2, and 3. And then this episode kind of took a step back in the sense that it was just, we're going to make everybody feel bad.
Yeah. I mean, at one point watching the show with Sherry, I turned to her, I was like, this is almost too much to watch. Like, I don't know if I can watch this. There was like this certain point where it's like the sister had committed suicide. Navarro goes up to these men. One of the guys she like arrested in the first episode and just basically like takes out her anger on them. That's after she goes to the clinic and takes out her anger on the guy working there. Now, I definitely don't want to go back to that article, but he brings up the point of like, this person wouldn't be able to just like walk out after a couple of hours. I like what you said, that like maybe there actually was a supernatural element there, and maybe she saw a way to like get out of the clinic. But I will say that like it kind of did stretch reality for me a little too much. The fact that like she could just leave and be gone from there and they wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
It's already a small town to begin with. People are already aware of everybody's issues. Like the fact that this like very mentally ill woman could just walk out, that would be pretty negligent of them, And so she, like, I felt bad for her. I've said this on the show before. My father has mental illness. I've visited my father in places like that. And so, whenever a character has mental illness, I feel bad for them. I could not imagine the terror of like having hallucinations like the sister did. But I also really do like how it was done, where she goes to commit suicide. The guy in the article said it was like romanticizing suicide. I didn't think it like made it seem special. I think it just made it really, really sad. Like, I think that like when she was on the phone and I could see that she was outside because it was dark and cold, I was like, okay, she's at that ship. And then she takes off her clothes and she walks out into the ocean. I just felt like really sad for her, and I felt really sad for Navarro. You know, I mean, like there are shows where the main characters suffer so much to where it almost seems like it's too much for a person to handle. And I do think Navarro. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say there. I felt for Navarro there. I felt for her anger, and I do like her as a character because I think she's multi-layered, and there's a lot of not to quote Shrek, but there's a lot of like layers to peel back for her.
Yes.
But that said, I do love when she goes to the bar and my first thought was to just call him Aquaman.
Yeah.
Right?
Something Kavik or something.
Kavik, who like is like the guy that she's like hooking up with, but he just comes across as like one of the few genuine people.
Yeah.
In this town, and he wants like so much for her to like feel better. And I did like the fact that like it at one point it looked like he was getting down on his knee to propose, and he's distracting her so he can like pop her finger back into place.
Yeah.
And then like to just bear hug her like that. I thought that was a really good, genuine moment.
Yeah.
Like much needed. I think this was I would probably say I like this episode the least so far of the series, but I also think in an 8-episode series, this is like the pivot point.
Yeah.
I think we've now, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think we've pivoted very heavily into supernatural now.
Yeah.
And they're coming back from the dredges. They've both seen things and heard things in the darkness. And I think we're going to like find some resolutions in the next couple episodes. The next episode actually comes out Friday.
I know.
Which is awesome.
I know you're gonna want to like review it earlier, but Sherry wants to watch it on Sunday, so we gotta wait till Monday. I'm sorry, unless you want to.
All right, Friday is Shudder is. I think that's Joe Bob's Valentine's Day special, so we could. I'll distract myself with that, and then I'll try to watch it and remember enough of it to talk about it with you.
Okay, there you go. But I wanted to bring up another thing too. We watched Tigers Are Not Afraid, and we talked about that movie. You guys go check that review out on our channel now. But I noticed similarities between Tigers Are Not Afraid in this episode, and this show in general too. But there's the idea of indigenous women or women, just women in general, in these areas that are not safe, and just sort of like being brutally killed. And in the case of Annie Kotok, and in the case of the mother in Tigers Are Not Afraid, it's just like they're dead. That's it. There isn't any kind of like justice. There isn't this manhunt. There isn't this, mass funeral or protest. It's just they're dead. They're gone. That's it. And then, of course, like they kind of come back in a spiritual form to kind of haunt the living afterwards. And I think it's interesting, right? Because I don't know if we mentioned this on Tigers Not Afraid review, but there's the murder of both of the main murdered women in these shows and movies where it's on a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
The mom is murdered on a cell phone brutally. Annie Kotok is murdered, or at least like something happens to her.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a similar scene, even though Annie's talking directly at the camera and the mom is being video recorded by someone else. But in both cases, their bodies are moved too, I think. And, there's something about that. I wrote a review on Letterboxd about this show, and I'm sorry, about Tigers Not Afraid. And there's something about the idea of rewatching over and over again the murder of an innocent woman. You know, it's like, because the people that are watching the murder in both the movie and this are people that were connected to the woman, right? And so it's like you're watching someone else murder a loved one or someone you're close to, and you kind of become desensitized to it because you're just watching it over and over again. It's really disturbing stuff, but I think that Isa Lopez is trying to say something there with that.
Yeah, I mean, and this episode was full of like brutal violence towards women. I mean, Navarro charges at those guys, but she's effectively like beaten to a pulp by 3 adult men.
Yeah.
Like kicked on the floor.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's you know, even like, I don't know. It's just this was a very like brutal episode and a lot to have to get through. Mm-hmm. So I do kind of hope we get back to the detective aspect of it so that like, I don't have to like go to bed, like upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, I mean, and like, I stuff is like totally like, there are some movies that I've seen that I've used the line like, this movie isn't made to be enjoyed. It's just meant to be experienced. And I feel like that was this episode. Like there's nobody who's watching this, whether you work for Forbes or not, nobody's watching this episode and getting a sense of like pure enjoyment out of it. Like nobody's getting entertainment value for this episode. They're feeling things. And they're being shown like graphic depictions of violence, like graphic depictions of, suicide, mental health, people in crisis, people struggling to make it through the day. And yeah, like it just felt like, I kind of felt like at one point, like I think I said this earlier, where it just felt like dominoes, where it's like, well, hey, have we shown John Hawk's character? Yeah, let's watch something bad happen to him. Let's watch something bad happen to these people. And it's like, the joke is the one character who goes out of their way to seek pleasure in this episode can't even get it. Like Jodie Foster drunkenly drives to her booty call's house. Yes. And like they argue enough that she just puts her clothes back on and leaves. So it's like even attempting to like alleviate, and she only went there because of her misery and because of her. So it's like the one person in this entire episode. Well, no, I don't even, because like Navarro attempted to like get through her anger through violence. And Jodie Foster attempted to get through her anger and her sadness through sex. And neither one of them was able to even get that little dose of euphoria that comes from like punching a guy in the face or, getting laid, because, no joy was allowed to be had by anyone.
Yeah, there was no joy. It was just like police department blue balls all around. Because even, I think Hank is Pryor's dad, right? I really actually like that scene where he's looking at the bottle of champagne in the fridge that was going to be for him and his mail order bride. And then he looks on the bed and there's all the rose petals and he just starts picking up the rose petals and putting them into his hands. You're right. There's like goodness, happiness is denied to all these characters. And I think that there is this sort of ancient evil that needs to be dealt with before people can go ahead.
That also ties for me back to just the setting. I think like there's no, the cliche is there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Not here, there isn't. And I think that's and that's why like the stars in the sky don't bother me, because it's like I think that there is an artistic point of it is, and like even 4 episodes in, it still messes with my head because I'm like, oh well, of course it's bedtime, but oh wait, no, it's not. Like I don't know what time it is when these things are happening.
Right.
So
Right.
like I don't know when characters are supposed to be asleep. I don't know when they're supposed to be out relaxing at the bar. I don't know when they're supposed to be at work. Nothing about it, because it's always pitch black. They always tell you like December 24th, 7 days in, December 25th, 8 days in.
Right.
And you're like, this is gonna go on for another 3+ weeks.
Yep. Yep.
And so I wonder if like we're going to see almost like the movie we reviewed, The Seeding, where it's like, are they going to use like, you know, are we going to get closer and closer to the light, and are they going to solve this crime when the sun comes back up, as like a metaphor for like, these people needing the light to see the way, I don't know.
I absolutely 100% do think that the show will end in the daylight and it'll be after the 30 days are over. It's funny. The only time I know what time of day it is when Pryor is sneaking into his bed to get with his wife. I'm like, okay, that's late at night because the wife's asleep and she's mad at him. Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have no idea what the hell. It could be a late night hockey game. Could be a Saturday morning hockey game. Who knows what the hell's going on? But I've had this ticker scrolling across the bottom. This kind of brings us all to like a close here. Prehistoric whale bones, ice caves, and dregs. And so, we know at this point that Annie Kotok was killed within this cave, and then her body was moved to the site where they found her, right? The murder site. And then they show that it's like a prehistoric whale, like you mentioned. There actually was a sequence where I think Jodie Foster might have even had this vision of like graves, but they were with like whale bones. Do you remember that? There was like whale bones going across there. And go ahead.
No, and then there's also when they go to find the indigenous guy, and he's gone and he's left, and what I thought that was a piece of scrimshaw, right? Like a whale bone with the spiral on it.
Right. And I'm a little worried because Navarro takes that, and I think she leaves it with whatever the fuck his name, whatever.
Kovic, yeah.
Kovic, yeah. She leaves it with him, and I'm hoping that something bad doesn't happen to him because he has that thing. The spiral is clearly the sign of something bad. We see it in that the guy you just mentioned. We see it in his house, and then I think we see it also in the dregs at the very end. And I just wanted to mention the dregs because that's where the last scene of the episode takes place. Navarro and Danvers go there because they're chasing down this guy who essentially has suffered some similar injuries to the people that died in the ice from Salal. And this guy has like no past whatsoever. He's been like off the grid, but he does have a little bit of a criminal history. They're able to track him down to the dregs, and they think they're following Clark, but then they realize it's this guy, Otis. And Otis is actually wearing Clark's jacket too. It's a good sequence. Sherry was a little bit bothered by it because she felt like regardless of Navarro having these visions, she would still stick to the case and like go after this guy versus like kind of following her sister's footsteps. I felt like she was too kind of hypnotized to stick to the case. What do you think?
That whole end sequence was a little strange, but I think it was like disorienting on purpose.
Yeah.
Like it kind of felt like I didn't know how high up they were climbing. Jodie Foster's going up and down stairs. I didn't, and then there's like that rogue Christmas tree, and there's like spirits around. So like I think that the intention there was to be disorienting, and it worked. And again, I don't know what he is.
It's cutting in and out. Is someone calling you? Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, fuck. Danny's giving me the finger. I'm going to talk while he's trying to get the sound
I got
back.
you. I hear you
Okay.
now. Do you hear me?
Okay. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I
What was?
accidentally opened my AirPod case and it connected and took
Oh
away
yeah,
the.
okay.
Um, uh, I just hope that we get to like. I thought that that was a cool setting, the dregs, but again, it just it. I want to move forward with the detective story. I want to make, like one thing True Detective season 1 did a great job on was there was always a lead, and it never felt like one of my big complaints with um one of my like big complaints with like the Star Wars sequels, for instance, is they felt more like video games where it was like we need to find the master uh uh the masturbator or whoever it is.
Hey, he's
The,
right here.
who was Benicio del Toro? He was like, oh, the
He's
master
a code
hacker.
breaker. Yeah, yeah,
Code
yeah,
breaker. Yeah,
yeah,
we
yeah.
need to find this master code breaker. Let's go off on this adventure side quest. Oh, we need this one piece of one thing that will help us find the next piece of a different thing. Let's go off on, and they didn't feel like movies as much as they felt like video games.
Gotcha.
Um, and like True Detective season 1 never felt like that to me. It felt like they were investigating those crimes, and they were the interviews and the people they were going after and the people they were talking to, it always tied back to that case.
Yep. Yep.
And that's why I was so invested in it. By the end, I was like sitting there watching the 8th episode going like, oh my god, they're gonna get this guy, they gotta get it, come on. And I want this show to get back to that. I really did feel that for the first couple of episodes. This episode felt like a a, a, a pause on a lot of the investigation to to like put these characters in their lowest possible state, and then maybe it's going to bring them back up to uh to solve the case and get to the bottom of something. But like,
Yeah.
get to those tunnels, get to the that cave. I'm a sucker for anything that has to deal with something in the water, a giant animal in the water. Talk to me about prehistoric whales and give me some Lovecraftian whale demon,
Yeah.
please. Like I want to get back to that. I didn't like. It sounds like I'm even saying I didn't like this episode. I did. Like I
Yeah.
didn't dislike it. It was just it felt something separate from the main story where it was like we're going to do an episode on like everyone's lowest point, everyone's grief, and we're going to put the mystery, the detective story on the back burner, and I want that to be back next episode.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's ironic because when you watch the coming next week scenes, it shows like them saying, "Hey, we're off the case. The case is closed." Like there's all the case is getting shut down for them in Ennis, and it looks like Anchorage is taking over basically. That Christopher Eccleston, the booty call for Jodie Foster, he's with his teeth whitening machine, he's shutting down Jodie Foster. It's funny. You gotta love Danny where he can tie in Lost and the Star Wars sequels into our discussion of True Detective Night Country. But you know what? This actually did have a polar bear too in it, like fucking Lost. So yeah, anyway, I think we're in agreement that like this probably would be our lowest ranked out of this season, but we're still very much invested. We're not of this opinion of this one side where it's like, oh, there's all these flaws because of logic. We're still going to give it a chance. Danny, why don't you tell people what they can find on our channel right now?
So I have delved back into Dario Argento and the IFC Center in Manhattan, which I became a member of about a month ago. They're hosting Panic Attacks, the films of Dario Argento, an entire retrospective of his career. It ran from the very end of January. It runs through Thursday, February 8th. So if you live in the New York area and you want to go see some of the Dario Argento classics, including Suspiria, Opera, the new documentary about his life and his films, Panico, you can go on ifccenter.com, look up their schedule. I put up a short review of Inferno. I put up a short review of Tenebrae. I was there twice in the last 2 days to see those films. Yesterday, Tenebrae was the Shudder showcase. Sam Zimmerman from Shudder was there. And both of those films, if you don't live in the New York area, they are streaming on Shudder. And Pete and I said before recording that we're going to probably cover some of Argento's giallo work to try to tie into some Valentine's Day themed stuff for the month of February. So I'm looking forward to that. Even though I saw it last night, I would love to talk more in depth about Tenebrae. I think it's such a great movie with one of my favorite scores of all time.
Nice. Some Goblin, right?
Well, Claudio Simonetti and a couple other people. Simonetti from Goblin, yeah. But man, friggin' so good.
Nice.
Had it in my head all night last night.
Oh man. Okay, cool. Well then I'm totally down for talking about some Argento with you guys. If you actually watch our videos all the way to the end and you have some Argento picks, let us know too. You know what we should add to our little Valentine's Day Argento list. Also, let us know what you thought about this really depressing episode of True Detective. We are so very grateful for you guys watching, and we will be back next week. I think it'll be earlier, like Monday we'll record. Tuesday we'll have the next episode up for True Detective Season 2.